Good afternoon, Year 4. Let's jump into some science. So, we're obviously continuing our work on life cycles and how animals survive. We're jumping into some work on the environment and habitats. So, as you can see on the screen there, an environment is the living and non-living surroundings of a living thing, including the factors that can influence its growth and survival. So, right now, I'm in a classroom environment. It's made up of living things like students and teachers. It's made up of non living things like desks and chairs. All of these things influence our growth and our survival. Okay? A habitat is a place in an environment where an organism usually lives. So, a habitat is where we live. Okay? An environment is a place we occupy. Habitat is where we specifically live. So, my habitat would be my house. Okay? So, first of all, complete this worksheet thinking carefully about the impacts of temperature, drought, and flooding. So, let's have a look at this worksheet here. You would have got that sent out to you. So, it's a bit of a flowchart, and it talks about the non-living things that affect living things. And the first one, of course, is rain. Rain is very important to living things. The amount of water from rain in a habitat influences the types of plants and animals that can live there. All living things need water. Plants and animals require water to live and grow. Different plants and animals require different amounts of water. So here it says, predict what might happen if there are extremes in these factors. So here's an example. Too much rain, too much water. If there is too much rain, areas can flood, killing plants and animals. Constant rain can wash away soil. Plants with shallow roots may fall over and not grow well in these conditions. So that's an effect of too much rain. I want you to think of what happens when there's not enough rain. So if there's not enough rain, there's going to be not enough water. Write a few sentences about what happens in an environment, what happens to living things when there's not enough water. Write it in that box. Off you go. So one thing you might have talked about is not enough water leads to areas undertaking drought, which results in animals dying because they don't have a water source. It also results in plants dying because there's not enough water. It also, constant drought also dries out the land, which also makes the land vulnerable to erosion. Remember last year we learned that when it gets really hot, the ground can crack, can't it? And when the ground cracks, it's harder for plants' roots to grow. So it has a massive effect. You could talk about that as well. And let's look at the next one, sunlight. Something that we need to survive, but we need the right amount of it. So here it says, how this factor affects living things. I want you to write about how sunlight affects living things. Off you go. So the amount of sunlight that hits an area determines what kind of animals live there. So in Australia, where it's really hot, we've got animals that have adapted to that climate. Whereas in areas where it's cold, you see different kinds of animals, don't you? What happens when we have too much sunlight? I want you to think about that. What happens when plants and animals get too much sunlight? I want you to write your answer there. Off you go. So too much sunlight could end in end up with an extreme climate. We'd end up with animals getting overheated. Okay, think about what happens to you when you're out in the sun all day. You get sunburnt, you get heat stroke, which will make you sick, which can lead to death of animals and also death of plants. I want you to think now what happens when there's not enough sunlight. Okay? Pause the video and write what happens to living things when there's not enough sunlight. So we know if plants don't get enough sunlight, they're not getting that photosynthesis, which is the process of sunlight hitting a plant and the plant transforms it into food. So if there's not enough sunlight, plants are going to struggle to grow. Animals are also going to, their sleeping patterns might get mixed up, things like that. So it's quite dangerous. And you get the idea now. So I want you to do this next one, which is about temperature by yourself, okay? So write down in the first box how temperature affects living things, and write in the second box what happens when we get extreme temperatures. Off you go. Okay. Next part says, look at the different pictures of habitats. So here are some habitats here. We've got a rainforest, we've got a pond, we've got a mangrove habitat, we've got a desert habitat, grassland habitat, farmland habitat. So we've got 6 habitats there. Choose 3 of those habitats. So you might want to pause the video, look at the habitats, and choose 3, and write down those 3 that you've chosen. In a dated page of your science book, write down the environmental factors of each habitat. For example, temperature, the amount or quality of water, and the amount of sunlight. So write down, if you chose the rainforest habitat, write down what the temperature is like and how the temperature affects the different animals and plants. Write down the amount of water. We know that in a rainforest there is more water, isn't there? That's why it's very green. And the amount of sunlight. So write down some different environmental factors that those 3 things have on a rainforest. Off you go. So do it for each of your environments that you've chosen. And then what you can do is write down what plants and animals might live in your 3 habitats. So if I'm thinking of a rainforest, I know that there's lots of palm trees in rainforests. I know that there's lots of grasses, different types of grasses and mosses. I know that there are all sorts of different animals, lots of insects, because insects are attracted to moist environments. Lots of bird species in rainforests. Okay, so whereas in a desert, it's more shrubs, isn't it? It's more shrubs and dry grasses. And the animals, I know that kangaroos live in the desert. I know that wombats live in the desert. Camels, those sorts of animals are what live in the desert. So go ahead and for each of your habitats, write down what plants and animals you think might live there. Off you go. That's basically it for science, guys. So you've learned a little bit about habitats. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you might have even drawn pictures of your habitats as well, with the different animals and plant species that you listed. Okay. I'll see you guys tomorrow. On this note, I might mention that I'm going to try and do a live stream tomorrow morning at about 9:30. We have to do 9:30 because the year sixes have got that 9 o'clock time slot covered. So we're going to do our own live stream at 9:30. Thank you for coming to the live stream on Friday. We had a lot of fun, and tell your friends that we'll do another one tomorrow at 9:30. Happy learning, guys.